Welcome to the Beyond the Scope podcast presented by NDMD Productions and made possible by Augusta Podcasts. Your one-stop shop for launching your podcast. Let Augusta Podcasts do all the heavy lifting and give you the tools you need to turn your podcast dreams into reality. Learn more at augustapodcast.com/ndmd. I am your host, second-year medical student, Andy. And if you are familiar with the NDMD YouTube channel, you'll know that we love sharing stories from students, residents, and attendings of different medical professions while giving you an inside look into their lives, not just as healthcare workers, but as the incredible people they are as well. This podcast will continue to share those stories and experiences of those awesome people who I am so fortunate to call my peers, colleagues, and friends. Here we'll have more long-form and free-flowing conversations about the things medical training doesn't exactly teach you, things that are beyond the scope of our practice, if you will. So, things like getting engaged in planning weddings as a medical student, how to build up mentorship in student organizations to improve and impact your communities, investing as a student, changing the mindset of publishing in medical school, like today's episode, and so much more. So, with that being said, let's introduce today's guests. And I'm always excited to bring fellow classmates from the MCG class of 2024 because I get to witness firsthand how amazingly talented and smart everyone is on a daily basis. And additionally, I've talked a lot about keeping up your creative habits and creative passions while in medical school. So I love highlighting the people who have found a way to merge creative passions that they have had before into their medical training process. So today I am happy to introduce the author of the children's book, The Virus That Came to Town, Wesley, how are you today, man?
Doing pretty good, Andy. Thanks for having me on.
So before we dive into the process of your somewhat non-traditional publication, at least when it comes to like an academic context, can you introduce yourself, where you're from, undergrad and major, and then like favorite food? Why not?
Yeah, okay. I'm Wesley Walters. I'm from Athens, Georgia originally. Go Dogs. I went to school for undergrad in Birmingham, Alabama at Samford, which is also the Bulldogs, so that's fun. And I like to say those are the better Bulldogs. And then now I'm at med school at MCG. And my favorite food is sushi.
Sushi?
Yeah, of any type, really.
Okay.
But yeah.
Nah, I respect.
Thank you.
So we got, for those of you watching the YouTube version, you'll see a nice little prop sitting up next to Wesley, the beautiful cover of a book that, like, how does it feel to have, like, something that was just an idea completely tangible in your hand sitting right next to you?
Yeah, it feels pretty wild because it took like maybe a year and 2 months from the conception of the idea to actually having something that I could hold. And I remember it was the same day that we had a final exam that I got the shipment of the books in. So it was like the most emotional roller coaster of a day. So it literally finished like the longest, worst final exam ever. And then got back to my apartment and saw like 50 boxes of books sitting there. And so that was pretty great.
Dude, that is awesome.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, this in general is really crazy. So can you kind of walk us through how you came up with the idea for making a children's book?
Yeah, so when I came up with the idea, I was over in Birmingham, Alabama. And so it was like the summer before medical school started. And I was working with a group doing COVID research. We were trying to repurpose existing medications to combat COVID because that was still like before anybody had any meds or anything for it. Mm-hmm. So we were doing really cool research, but a lot of what we were finding like secondary to the research was that all these public health initiatives, mask wearing, social distancing, limiting travel, things like that, none of those were new ideas. We saw those in like the 1918 flu epidemic and tons of other past scenarios like this. But we had just forgotten those things. And so kind of brainstorming with people and like, okay, if none of these are new ideas, how can we create some sort of public education tool that, reminds people of these things in the future so that we don't forget the next time a virus comes around or comes to town, if you will. And so after brainstorming a bunch, just came up with children's book, kind of family, friends, and myself, we all kind of realized like, oh, we remember random things from children's books growing up. Maybe if I did this in a children's book format, at least one thing would stick with us, moving forward. So that's kind of how I came up with the idea, fundraised for it, worked on it for over a year, was working on it in med school. And yeah.
How long did the writing process take for this?
The writing took a long time. So I would say I'm always more of a scientific person than an artistic person. And so I leaned on lots of help from friends and family to do the editing. The whole writing process took probably 5 or 6 months, and it was just a children's book. Like, there are not that many words in this book. And so, to be honest, and so it blew my mind on how do people write full books and do editing for full books. But yeah, just tons of rounds of edits to make sure that it was clear and understandable, and it's going to be clear for kids. But yeah, so probably 5 or 6 months for that, and then the rest was just finalizing the illustrations and waiting for the books to get here.
Yeah, and I think illustrations are a big part of any children's book, and like, again, we'll probably be flipping through the book on the YouTube version, so if you're listening on any streaming platforms, go check out the YouTube version on my channel. But how did you go about like the illustrations? Who were the talented people that came to your team? And also, you can probably show off some of the pictures within the book if you want.
Yeah, no, I'd be happy to. So would it be easier like...
Yeah.
Uh-oh. Like this?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's my first time, guys. Sorry. So
just new at this.
The illustrator, her name is Abby Little Jessup, and so she came up with this guy, which I love, the little virus guy for it, and every other illustration in there. So my view originally was I had the book kind of in a PowerPoint, and with like clip art images and descriptions on like how I kind of wanted each thing to be, which again, I'm like not very artistic at all. So the clip art that I threw in, and like some of the stuff I tried to draw in there with PowerPoint, it was pretty miserable. And so Abby, I reached out to literally everybody I knew from college who did anything in art. And I said, have you guys illustrated a children's book? Would you be willing to do something like this? What do you think? And so would hear yeses or nos and then get like sent to other people through them. And so it was like 3 or 4 people down the chain that I got connected to Abby. And so then I reached out to her, said, hey, this is my idea. This is what I'm thinking. Can you maybe like send an example of the virus or send an example of the title page that you're thinking, just to see if our styles kind of match up or what I'm thinking matches up. Mm-hmm. And so she sent me this little guy in like 5 different color formats. And I was like, I love it. I love this virus. We got to go. We got to go with your illustrations. And so she knocked it out of the park. But yeah, so that's how it was, kind of a crazy story. That's how I got connected with Abby. But yeah, so I guess we can flip through some of these things. So this was like a really fun page where it has like the family. So the family is multiracial. That was another thing that both Abby and I wanted, like from the beginning of the thing, of the book creation, just to be way more of an inclusive story. Mm-hmm. And then like we have funny things in the illustrations, like in the supermarket, the cart's full of toilet paper as like a little homage to when we all thought we were going to run out of toilet paper, right? Paper products limited, little things like that.
Dude, that looks so cool. This is my first time seeing the inside of the book too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and as it goes on, like the virus gets bigger and bigger, and so that's a really fun and dramatic page. My favorite part about this is just like all the people struggling. I mean, that sounds bad to say that's my favorite part, but I think that's like a really funny part. And yeah, this is like the sentiment of how we feel, right? Like in COVID, or at least like lots of times, right? It's like, and on the page it says like, oh my gosh, we're trapped. We don't know what to do. What are we going to do? And so they're like trying to get away from this giant virus. And then the savior of the day, the doc, is like, hey, have no fear. I'm here. Follow what I have to say. We'll kick the virus out of town. And again, we really wanted inclusivity with the doc. So the doctor is an African-American female. We wanted it to be a very inclusive book. But yeah, so I love, and she, like the hand washing page, I love.
Dude, that looks so good.
Yeah, I love what she did with the illustrations. But yeah.
Wow. Yeah, and so one of the cool things I want you to talk about too is you actually got to take these to like different events, including reading events to the local, I'm assuming elementary schools.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how was that?
It's been awesome. So it's been really cool. So got connected with two of the elementary schools here in town in Augusta, and they invited me to come read, and it was fantastic. So one of the schools I sat for their entire second grade, because one of their teachers actually passed away from COVID, which is terrible. But they wanted me to come read to the second grade class and kind of open the room up for questions if they had any about COVID. Naturally, we've talked a lot in med school about this, but naturally, COVID's a really hard thing for kids to understand, and I guess the pains that come along with it are a lot. So it was really cool to be able to enter into that space and speak to kids, allow for questions, answer the questions as best as I could to all these kids. But overall, they love the book, they love the illustrations, they love the virus. There's like some of the pages in there where the virus is kind of hiding behind things, and so the kids love, can you guys see where the virus is? And everybody's screaming, it's behind the couch, So that was really fun. There's a lovely hand washing song in the back of the book, which I know I said I wasn't artistic, but I did write the song. It goes to Jingle Bells, so I didn't make up the tune. But yes, I don't know if I need to trademark Jingle Bells or not, but it's Jingle Bells. But yeah, they love that, so.
Dude, I can imagine I touch on initiatives that can outreach and really impact your community, and this is one of the things that I never even thought of. Like, we always have those initiatives within medical school of we can go out and teach classes to the local schools, but never thought about bringing your own book to read.
Yeah, it's kind of a fun idea. And I'll say, throughout med school too, I kind of have this passion of taking complicated things and making it simple for people to understand. And I think we've learned ways to do that in school. I love to practice on my family and be like, hey, this is what we're learning this week. Can I explain this to my grandma? And half the time I have a really hard time explaining it to my grandma, but I learn how to word things a lot easier, Yeah. And so this, I think, is kind of the virus aspect, or the virus version, I guess, of this for me, is to say okay, how could I create this really complicated thing that none of us really know what's going on, and make it understandable to children. I've loved being able to do this and bring this book into the community. It's cool.
For sure, it's a skill. It really is to be able to communicate very complex topics so that a second grader could understand. It's going to be useful.
Oh,
really.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
All right, that's super awesome. And now something that I'm really curious about, I think I asked you while I was trying to get you on the show, is kind of what the process of publishing a book is like. So I'm going to be completely honest, I have no idea what the process for publishing a book is, even consists of remotely. So can you explain the steps of what it takes to get it from an idea to out in the wild in stores or Amazon stuff?
Yeah. So to be quite honest, I knew nothing right at the beginning of this. So very humbly, I knew no steps. And so I was, again, leaning on lots of friends and family who've done similar things. And so for me, I chose the route of self-publishing, which is a little bit different than if you choose to go a publisher route. Publishers generally have lots more rules of things that they'll publish or the way the book needs to be formatted. And Abby and I both felt pretty strongly about the way we formatted this specific book and did our images. And so we kind of wanted to go the self-publishing route, or I wanted to go the self-publishing route so that we could keep the format how we wanted. But yeah, so I literally Googled self-publishing companies. I had no idea. And was, again, talking to family and friends and kind of got recommended some. And so I actually used, am I cool to say a company name? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So, bleep it out or something.
I mean, as long as they send us a check later, that's fine.
Yeah, perfect. Perfect. So I used Print Ninja is who I use, and they're based up in Illinois. And so Abby and I worked together first to have the entire book done and formatted in a PDF file. So that was step one. So turn my very terrible PowerPoint with ideas and clip arts into real words on a page with the real illustrations also on that page. all formatted correctly, right? And so that was like step one. That took a while. And then I submitted that whole PDF file to the self-publishing company. And I imagine like some of this would be similar if you went to a publisher, and said, here are all the things, here are images, here's the book. Can we print this, get a quote, whatever. And so you had to tweak it some because each printer kind of uses different formats. And so you do have to tweak it a little bit to make sure like the sizes are correct. But yeah, so then once I gave it to them, it was super easy. They approved it, gave me like an electronic version that I could proofread, make sure it all looked correct. And then, then I just like finalize it. They actually print all their stuff over in China. So that was a very, very long chunk of just like you're in limbo because all this gets sent out to the publisher, goes to China to print. And then like every couple weeks I get an email that says, done printing, now we're proofreading. Done proofreading, now we're like packaging. And so you're really just like, I hope that it's going to arrive soon. And so that took a really long time because when the first shipment, I've ordered another one that should be here like any day now, another shipment of books. But that first shipment of books also hit when the Suez Canal thing happened and everything else happened, supply chain. And so everything on the earth was slow, supply chain wise, right? So it was an insane time to try to get books in an expedited time at all. So I think it was delayed like 2 months from when it was originally going to be. But yeah, so then they came, and it was great. And then they just literally shipped it straight to my house. So currently I am the distributor, the marketer, the promoter. I'm doing all this stuff. So Amazon is very picky about how they get their books. So my book is not on Amazon right now. It's just on the website, The Virus That Came to Town. If I were to want to go to, and I do want to be on Amazon, that would be way easier for me, I think. And for all of this to sit in their warehouse and not my apartment would be way easier. But to do that, they prefer to have like a distributor send them stuff, and some publishing companies will do that. The one that I chose doesn't do that because they mainly do self-publishing stuff and stuff that's not that large scale, I think. But yeah, so it's like all these interesting little nuanced things that I knew nothing about till I like started getting into it.
Dude, that's the joy of it. Well, maybe the joy and the challenge of it.
Yeah.
That I could definitely relate to the whole I am, producer, editor, director, writer.
Yeah, right. You totally get that. Yeah. You're wearing all those hats.
I think it's kind of fun though, because you get to be in charge of, where things go. And then also like you have all the say of production and distributing, really.
Yeah, true. And it is funny too, because people will ask me like, oh yeah, can you bring a book to read? Like reading the kids, like I got the question was like, oh, do you have enough books that you can bring to read? And I was like, I have all the books. They're all in my apartment. I was like, I don't have to go anywhere to get the books. I will have as many as you want.
How many you need? I'll bring a box.
Exactly.
And I think that was kind of a good segue to when I was talking about it was a challenging but pretty joyful experience. What are some of the important lessons that you learned throughout the publication process? Do you have any like proud moments versus like any regrets? And I'm sure you got both.
Yeah. So we'll start with the proud moments. So truly, like when the book arrived at my apartment, like I wept, and that may be like super dramatic, and it probably was super dramatic. We already talked about the emotional roller coaster of the day. We had just done a final exam. It was dramatic. But yeah, I mean, just the lesson of if you want to try to do something and you've never done it before, go out there and try to do it. The worst thing that can happen is it never happens, but you learn something, right? And so this was kind of that for me as well. Like I had this idea. I didn't know if it was going to work. Let's just try it and see what happens. And so to hold that book in my hand was like the most like triumphant moment to be like, oh yeah, like that lesson was learned. Like don't be afraid to go try something that you've never done before, kind of thing. So that was really great. Other triumphant moments like that was just like reaching out to friends and family to get fundraising. to publish a book costs money. I have no money, as you may be able to relate to as a medical student. We don't have a lot of money.
Yeah.
Let me say once more, we don't have a lot of money. And so
there's a red number in the account.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I'm well versed in negative numbers now. Yeah. But so to reach out to friends and family, to start fundraisers, to do these things, that was very empowering, to ask people, hey, do you think this is a cool idea too, right? Because we can all sit there and say, yeah, I want to try something new. I think this is a cool idea. And everybody you know is like, hey, it's not that great of an idea. And so to reach out and be like, hey, I think this is cool. Does anybody else want to fund this and also think this is cool? And got a ton of support from friends and family. It was a good feeling. And a good lesson as well, like be able to lean on those around you. And, it takes a village to make a children's book, if you will. I don't think that's the phrase, but it definitely takes a village to make a children's book.
Yeah.
Some not so great things is know if you're artistic or not. And I am not. And it took me a while to get that. So just like going back and forth with the illustrator of being like, like when we first started out, sometimes I don't share this story, but I think it's really funny, was I really wanted, so I was working with this research group, right? And like COVID was like the enemy. I mean, it still is, but it was like the worst thing that's ever created, right? And so when I was talking with other like fellow researchers working on these clip art things for the book, we wanted it to be like the scariest thing you can imagine, with like tentacles and like fangs and like stuff dripping off of the fangs. And like, we're like, yeah, this is the virus. It's like hiding in your house. It's like on the ceiling fan coming down when they're eating at kitchen, like in their kitchen. We wanted it to be like the grossest, scariest thing ever. And, which is hilarious because that would have been terrible for a children's book, right?
Yeah.
And so that's Abby, the illustrator. She came back to me and she was like, I got to be honest, man. I just don't think, I don't think kids want that. Okay. Like, and I was like, you know what, Abby, I think you're a genius and I should listen to you, because you're right. So that was just like a fun, humbling moment of like, oh yeah, like, yes, the virus is really scary and terrible and all this, but we want to frame the story so that children will want to read this book and not have nightmares caused by this book. Right. So that was really funny, but yeah. So lots of little learned lessons throughout the thing.
What would you say was the hardest part of the process?
Yeah. I would say the hardest part was, I'm kind of torn between, fundraising was very hard, because it costs a lot more than I thought it would. And so, yeah, so that was a challenge. That was a challenge. Thankfully, like, book sales are going pretty well, right? So like we're in the clear now, right? It's kind of self-sustaining at this point. But that was a very challenging upfront thing for me personally, because again, med students have no money. So that was challenging originally. That was one of the hardest parts. And then, another part was just to stay motivated with it. As mentioned, like, half the process was while we were in med school, while we were in our first year of med school, which was also during COVID, which was also very hard as med school because a million reasons, right?
Yes.
And so all those reasons that made it hard. And then I was trying to do this project on the back end. So staying motivated with it was very, very, very challenging. If I had a test that week and I also was trying to edit this book, or if I had a test this week and I had to email the publishing company with the new format of the book that was going on, but my mind was spread a million other things, just trying to balance all that was very, very challenging. But yeah, again, to have that book and hold it in my hands, it was like all of the thoughts of that like came flooding forward, and I was like, it was so worth it to stick with it and like, maybe not study the best that 1 week because I was emailing with the publisher or whatever. But it was well worth it. But yeah, those I would say were the hardest parts.
Dude, sure. It comes back to confidence in an idea too. Like, I just think back to when I was starting YouTube and everything, and like having to tell people like, hey, or actually I remember like sending out emails to people that had like 50,000, 100,000 subscribers, either that or had like couple mil on TikTok or something, and like having to try to figure out a way to present myself that skirted around the numbers. Because
Yeah.
it's like not that impressive when you're going, hey, I'm a creator, but I only have like 400 subscribers, or like I only have a couple thousand views across my entire channel.
Yeah.
And it's just like having that confidence of, okay, I believe in my work, I believe in my idea.
Yeah.
And like if I believe in it strong enough, I can present it confidently, that no matter who listens to it, can understand the mission of it. And I think like you probably had a very similar experience trying to get funding.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. Well, getting funding, or even so, before the book came out, I was really trying to like canvas this kind of like runway when the book came out to like instantly have distribution to people. And so I was like emailing libraries and emailing schools and things to be like, hey, like, I'm Wesley. I wrote this children's book. Can you take a look at like the electronic copy? It's coming in the mail. And like fell flat on so many of those things of people who were like, that sounds like a really cool idea. Let us know when the book's here. We don't believe you. Or like some stuff where they're like, yeah, let's take like, we'll have a copy of the book if you want to send it to us for us to look at, and we'll like evaluate. Right. So then you're like handing free books out to people, which is also can kind of be challenging. Because as we discussed, right, there's like a financial aspect to this, right? And so I was met with very similar things to that, where you're sitting there being like, I swear it's a real idea. I'm trying to, I swear it's a real idea. Like, I think I'm a real author at this point. Like, it's a real book. I want this on your shelves for good reasons, But yeah, slowly but surely, that's like starting to break down the message behind it. People are still liking. So
yeah, those little like emails of, I don't really believe you or anything. It makes you stronger. It really does.
Yeah, eventually. Yeah. Eventually, it makes you stronger.
You grow thick skin to it.
Yeah.
And we'll kind of touch on like how things grow and how you've changed in a second too. But kind of wrapping up the section about the book, everything. Do you have any mentors or people to thank throughout the publication process that made your life, way easier than it could have been?
Yeah. So definitely, I mean, my parents were extremely helpful, so thank you to them. The amount, and like my whole family, thank you to them. The amount of times that we were, staying up till like 10 or 11 on FaceTime with like Google Docs, trying to edit these words, was so helpful. Friends back home in Birmingham, thank you so much, so helpful. Abby, when I tell you that like Abby Little Jessup carried me through so much of the process, because she had done books before. And so she had so much knowledge that I literally could not have done it without her. Through whether it was like, hey, the publisher said that they want this format. I have no idea what those words mean. Do you know what do you know what they're talking about? Yeah. Also, I don't know how to work any of the like digital things to be able to reformat or any of these images. Like, can you please do this? And just being so willing to go back and do these edits that were needed to make it all work and be able to translate what the publisher was saying to me, saying to us. Abby was so very important to this project. But yeah, some of my best friends over in Birmingham, one of them's a teacher, and a lot of her input went into like, how do we phrase this so that it's like entertaining to kids, right? So not just like a message, but that like they're still actually wanting to be part of the thing. So like the idea to hide the virus behind the couch, that was from her, which I think like revolutionized that page. Like even reading it in classrooms, like I found being able to flip to that page and be like, oh my gosh, do you guys see the virus? The entire energy in the room flipped and everyone's like back invested into the book, which was super, super cool. But yeah, all those people were very helpful.
That's awesome. I didn't know you had like a teacher's perspective on the team, because like that's super useful.
Oh yeah. She was great. And even like on our website, so she had really good input on the website. You can download free coloring pages from the book, which again was her idea. She was like, oh, you should have coloring pages so that teachers can buy the book and also download the pages on the website and have like a whole class day or a class exercise where like everyone's just coloring pictures from the book. And I was like, Anna, you are a genius. I would have never thought about that. Yeah. And so now we have that on the website. You just download free coloring pages. So yeah, so little things like that I'm not the most artistic person. So having lots of insight and help from her was awesome.
Dude, that's so cool. And
Yeah.
I think like with kind of the excitement and everything going on with this book, do you plan on publishing anymore?
I think it would be really fun to keep publishing. I've considered, honestly, like some sort of children's medical like series, you know. I don't know what the next one would be. My family and I have like joked about lots of different names and stuff. But the virus that came to town obviously is really important for the virus that's currently in our town. Yeah, I've toyed around with like children's series of medical stuff. Maybe like an adult book, not medical, but like just other books, other ideas and things. But yeah, I would say if anything, this is kind of like got my appetite for it, you know?
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, you heard it here first. Look out for new books in the series
Exactly.
from this author. That's awesome. Now, for the kind of tail end of our talk, I want to introduce a topic that I'm very, very much passionate about. I've always been a huge advocate for keeping up creative passions in medical school, like I said earlier. And I think the more obvious showcasings of that have been like video work, podcasts, being part of like student organizations like music and medicine, or the a cappella group to perform at, student events, faculty ceremonies, and then even to patients. I think those are very obvious things that you can say, oh yeah, keep up your creative passions there. Especially because, the more traditional view of a publication is like an academic journal or turning a poster publication to a conference or something. But I don't think I've ever seen anyone publish a children's book as like a publication.
Yeah.
So in your experience, have your advisors or anyone told you about how valuable this experience is to you as a residency applicant? Because I kind of want to expand on the idea of how this process, even though it's not like directly academic, will make you a better residency applicant or even a better physician in the long run.
Yeah. So I'll start with like how maybe make a better physician, and then maybe talk about applicant. So as far as like a better physician, I truly think that like we talked about earlier, like having the practice of how can I take this really complicated thing and make it simple so that people can understand. I think that will always make you a better physician. Again, we're second year med students, so like take everything I'm saying about making you a better physician with a grain of salt, right? Because I am not one, but like again, talking with friends and family, right? Like, and talking to doctors that you've shadowed or I've shadowed that I really enjoy. Those were the docs that took the really complicated things and made it really simple for people to understand and seemed very approachable and had a little bit of humor with it, and like could be seen as like, a very approachable figure that you could come to for your medical care, which I think is always really valuable, and stuff that they, hint on in school at least. As far as a better applicant, for sure, people have like advisor meetings and things have asked, are you doing any publications, any research? I've said, yeah, so I did a children's book. I don't know, like, does that count as and they're like, what? I'm sorry, you did a what now? And I'm like, yeah, I did a children's book. And they're like, oh, like, when did you do that? I'm like, oh, last year. And they're like, yeah, that counts, buddy. Okay. And so I'm like, well, that's fantastic because I'm also not a huge fan of research. And so this is, I'm not a fan of myself doing research. I should say that. I love research. I think it's good. But yeah, so every advisor I've talked to is like, this is going to help for sure. Like it's kind of, it's out of the box kind of publication, like you're saying. And it's not what everybody else is going to have on their application as far as that goes. A bunch of people within our med school, they've said that I think one other student like 5 years ago or something wrote either a children's book or a book, but that I think they did it after med school. So I don't know if anybody else, not trying to flex or toot my horn, but I think this is things that people have told me, that I don't know if other people have written like a children's book during medical school, at least for our school. So I mean, that's kind of a fun feather in the hat, if anything, but I certainly didn't do it for those reasons, right? For the
Yeah,
application, for the feather in the hat, but it is kind of like fun, and it's, it's helpful that it does help my application.
Yeah. I think it's just more trying to bring home the message that these things are still worth investing your time into.
Oh, yeah.
Especially, I mean, this could be an entire another podcast in itself with step 1 becoming pass fail for us.
Yeah.
And like our class being the first year that across the board it's pass fail. So like program directors have literally no idea how to how to really gauge us besides like leadership extracurriculars.
Everything we do outside of school.
Yeah. So things like writing a freaking children's book, and if you don't want to flex for yourself, I will. You are the only person I have ever seen do this, and I think it's amazing.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Like it's gonna help. These are the conversations that will happen in your interviews. Not like, oh, I saw you were third author of this manuscript in whatever journal.
Exactly.
Unless it ends up in like Nature or something, then they're gonna be like, yo, how did you get into Nature? Like, can you talk about that?
Yeah.
And
even then, I'm like, probably not.
Yeah, like I was in a lab, I did some stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm in the same boat as you, where like research isn't exactly for me.
Yeah.
So, highlighting stuff like this, a huge fan of.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. And that's so. To your point, I think it's really great to do things like this and do these we learn about it in school, right? But like you're saying, like it's not really incentivized to do these public health things all the time. Like sometimes with like the clinics that are available to volunteer at school and stuff, but like public education wise, there's not a lot of incentive, I guess, to do these things unless like you actually take a second and be like, no, this is really good. And what they're telling us now, right, to do these things looks really good. If anybody out there is thinking about writing a children's book, I would highly recommend. Your community will enjoy it.
Well, that was my next question. Would you recommend someone who had a similar skill set and passion for them to do something like this?
Absolutely, yeah. So I think, for me personally, I'm kind of convicted with this idea that if I have the knowledge to do something and I have the ability to teach those around me, I ought to be doing that thing, right? And so I think if you have the ability to take complicated, it doesn't have to be medical, right? Complicated things, make it simple so that people can understand. I think you ought to be going out there and helping people understand. And that's, I think that's in medicine. I think that's in any aspect. So please, if I won't be offended if there's a competitor med student out there who is writing a book, just don't use my title. And educating the community as well. I think you ought to be out there. I would encourage everybody to do that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And again, I just want to nail it home. I told you I'm super passionate about this. Like I'm not just saying this because we're biased that myself and Wesley have done things kind of off the beaten path of like non-traditional publications, but like you've heard it here. Our faculty advisors have told us to invest time, invest energy into this. It is not this is dumb, like go get in a lab, go do something that's better. It's like, no, this is the better.
Yeah.
And
it's way more fun.
Exactly.
If I'm allowed to say. This was way more fun than pipetting. I would
tell
think
you that
so.
much.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let that be a big encouragement to medical students or even pre-meds that want to go to medical school, that like you're going to have to probably do a little bit of research here and there, but like if you do it and you realize it's not for you, it's not the end of the world. There are so many other ways that you can impact your community, and like, if you really want to distill it down, boost your CV to make you a competitive applicant than just like the traditional academic stuff. And so with that, we got a few more reflective questions and then we'll wrap up. So first one, what is the one advice you would give yourself a year ago?
It pertains to the book.
In general,
life. In general, wow. Life.
Getting deep here.
Getting deep, truly. A year ago. I would say, See, sorry, now I'm taking too much time because you asked about life. Life is hard. Yeah, I would say like give yourself some grace, I guess. Maybe that's like way too stereotypical of an answer, but for a med student. But yeah, I think the past year, I think in school in general, it's easy to be hard on ourselves. And COVID and like we already mentioned, all the mess that school was during or is during COVID. It's really hard to be hard on yourself, and can be challenging in lots of ways. So I would say give myself some grace and reach out to more people. Yeah, I think that was another just kind of side effect of COVID was it was tough to connect with people during med school.
Mm-hmm.
And so, or it was more difficult, I think. So yeah, so that's, I would say those two, I think you asked for one thing, but we're going to hyphenate those things. Have mercy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of students that are probably watching this that want to be in our shoes one day. So what is the one advice you would give to a prospective medical student watching or listening right now?
Good question. So this, okay. Again, these are life questions. I'm taking time. So I would say, for someone who wants to go to med school or is maybe just started med school this fall or something like that, I would say stick true to who you are. Not to get too controversial, but I think oftentimes school as an institution they teach you things, and that's important, but sometimes you get put in a box due to the teaching things, and we're not all made to go into the same box. And so I would say stay true to yourself, learn what you can, learn what you need to learn, but keep like the fundamentals of who you are, keep that. So whether it's in your patient interactions, whether it's the way that you communicate about topics, if you're funny, stay funny. Don't diminish yourself in order to fit into a box that school may or may not want you to be in. That's as controversial as I'll be, but
I think that's a really good response and really good advice too, because like everyone will get taught the same kind of cookie cutter algorithmic way to communicate with patients, to communicate ideas. But I think one of the best, like Dr. Salazar, I don't know if you've ever met him.
Yeah.
Incredible. I think like an absolute gem at our institution, but I had the honor of being his student for the like clinical PCL, so patient-centered learning. So he was the one who taught us all of the patient communication stuff, how to do physical exam, how to take a history. And he actually wanted us to like input our personality, input the way like we communicate just with him.
That's great.
Into the patient interaction. I think that speaks a lot to how medicine should effectively be taught. And like, sure, let me give you the framework, but let's not punish you for stepping outside that line. Because like at the end of the day, it's a human field.
Yeah.
You have to connect on a human level and communicate with a certain level of empathy and emotional connection.
Yeah.
And when you just take like the algorithm bare bones, you lose some of that. So I think that's really, really good insight that I agree on.
I'm glad you agree.
Yeah. And so last little bit before we get out of here.
Yeah.
Where can people find you on social media, and where can people pick up your book for the holidays?
Yeah, it's a great holiday gift, stocking stuffer, good for the kids, good for the family. Buy one for every member of your family. It's perfect. Really, all ages can read it, I promise. So you can buy the book at thevirusthatcametetown.com. Lovely. We have stickers, we have books, we have posters, free downloadable coloring pages. That would make a fun Christmas morning idea. There's a hand washing song in the back of the book that your family will love. All those things. So thevirusthatcametetown.com. And then myself, I don't have like a separate social media right now for the book. I just do everything on the website. My own social media is at Good King Wessels a little play on Good King Wenceslas for you music fans out there. I used to be in the band, and yeah, that's where that came from. I used to be called Wessels, and then like somehow we were doing Good King Wenceslas, and they were like, "That's Good King Wessels," and then that's how that came about, unfortunately. So yeah, for like 8 years, I've been Good King Wessels on lots of things. So Good King Wessels is me, but the virus that came to town.com for the book.
All right. Well, all those links and stuff will be in the description of the YouTube stuff and in the show notes of the streaming service versions. Go check it out. Go order the book. Thank you for coming on the show, Wesley, sharing your stories.
Thanks for having me, Andy. Woo-woo. Go buy the book. Get this thing.
Thank you so much for watching or listening to the Beyond the Scope podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's guests, and to make sure that you don't miss a single episode, make sure that you follow Beyond the Scope on all streaming platforms, as well as if you want to see the full video cut, subscribe to my YouTube channel, NDMD. As always, subscribe, like, follow, comment, all that good stuff, and we'll see you in the next one.